Hi guys, it's your host here, Jenny Core, with House of Impact podcast. I hope that this episode helps you heal, grow, expand, and become 1% better. If you're watching this, please subscribe and like or comment. That will mean the world. And if you're listening to this, share with someone that needs it. Let's go with the episode. Amy, welcome to House of Impact podcast. Thank you so much to be here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I think I've been following you for like 2 years now, and I've always admired how you own who you are, what you've been through, and how you actually spread the message of it's okay if you've been through hell and back, because I've also been through that. And like you can just start over and reinvent yourself. I think I want to start with kind of your story, because some people in the audience might have or are going through what you've been through, and that probably starts with your childhood, which wasn't all rainbows and flowers. How did your childhood shape you into the woman you are today, and how did it help you overcome a lot of the struggles that you've had later on in life?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I love sharing my story because it's very easy to look at someone who's in the 10th chapter of their story and compare yourself. And there's been quite a tumultuous, traumatic road to the empowerment and the embodiment that you see in how I present myself now. So for my childhood, I mean, I was very blessed in a lot of ways, but there was also a lot of trauma, and that trauma was sort of overlooked and not diagnosed, and I wasn't aware of it, and no one around me was able to support me with that because they weren't aware of it either until I was about 22. And I was in therapy, and right away I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was having panic attacks, and it sort of had been this very long downward spiral to that point, which started when I was a little girl. But I was just very good at repressing what I was going through. Dissociating was kind of my default pattern, but I reached a point where I couldn't keep a lid on it anymore, and that's why I ended up in therapy and on my healing journey. So for me, you know, the PTSD was the result, what I thought at 22 years old, a breakup. I was going through a very traumatic breakup. There was betrayal, friendships broke down as a result. There was dishonesty, like it was really, really bad, and I wasn't coping very well. I also got physically sick with pneumonia at the time, and I fell out with a lot of people because I was friends with a lot of that part, like my ex-partner, his friends. So I was very lost and very sad. But what I discovered through my therapy and my healing journey and understanding like, oh, okay, I've got PTSD, was that the roots were so much deeper. And about 2 years into the healing journey, I started having more flashbacks of some of my original traumatic memories that had kind of like laid the templates for the behaviors and that downward spiral that I'd been on. And that was from sexual trauma as a child for me. And also just being in abusive environments with abusive adults that, had left that imprint on me. But eventually, you know, it's what led to my healing journey and led to so many more beautiful parts of my journey. So hard, but still grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. How being like sexual like or abused in your childhood, and also then the breakup, how did that affect your self-worth? Because I think it's not the same being diagnosed with PTSD at, let's say, 16 or 15, or even when it happens and being diagnosed with PTSD that's been going on for years when you're like 22 and you're a full-grown adult woman.
Yeah. Sorry, what's the question?
How did that affect your self-worth as an adult? Because you have to deal and you had to fix things that were even not yours to fix in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. So low self-worth was a really core issue that I had to heal. And to be honest, there are certain aspects of it that I feel like I still have to look at from time to time. I think healing is like this onion, and while I've healed so much of that, and I think I have like amazing self-esteem and confidence now, and I've done so many things as a result of embodying that confidence and that self-worth, there are still like little aspects that might pop up from time to time where I'm like, oh, there's that old thing, and I have to look at that. But I think I have a much more compassionate lens through which I look at that through now. And I have a lot more tools to be able to move through that in a healthy way. But yeah, for me, because my trauma was around my sexuality and my body, I've had a lot of body image stuff that I've dealt with throughout my life. Never had a full-blown eating disorder, but just self-worth attached to how I look, how I present myself. And I also had a lot of self-worth that was attached to being perfect, being the good girl. And so being that perfect good girl on the surface for me was like a protection mechanism from my trauma. I think probably the reason that emerged for me was like, if I can just keep a lid on it and show up perfectly and be good at everything and be a good student and a good friend and popular and a good girl for my parents and always, responsible and, no one will ever have to worry about me, and then no one will open this box of pain that I'm carrying. And, that worked for a time to help me survive. But as an adult, I began to realize like this isn't working for me anymore. And quite literally, I couldn't keep a lid on it anymore when I was 22 and I went into therapy because those panic attacks were so inconvenient. They would just, pop up at any time, and they were very disruptive. And so I almost feel like the panic attacks were a way of like getting me to look at what was going on and to look at the ways that my self-worth was not only wrapped up in being perfect and good and responsible all the time, but the ways, the ways that wasn't working for me anymore. It wasn't making me happy. I wasn't healthy.
Did you feel validated when you were a kid, when you were going through all of that? Did you feel like if you, let's say, would have anxiety, because probably panic attacks are like the last straw from being anxious and having a lot of trauma. So I'm very curious to know, when you were like a kid and you would just, put this mask on, was that because you feel like you had to do all these things to prove your family, for example, that you were good enough? But like, were you feeling validated whenever you would feel anxious, or you would feel like you were not doing things as they expected you to do them?
So how I would describe the journey is from about 10 or 11 years old, I felt very numb. So I could perform on the surface. My parents thought I was super happy. They were like, we never have to worry about Amy. She's the child that we always know is going to like land on her feet, super independent. Even, all my friends' mums, they would be allowed to come to the party if I was going, because everyone was like, we trust that girl. She's got her shit together, right? But I was very numb. So like, I remember I couldn't cry. I remember when I was in high school, like a few people I knew had died. And I remember thinking to myself, I know I'm supposed to cry and be sad, but I just don't feel anything. And my mum has told me now that she noticed that change in me. It was almost like I had to disconnect from my humanity and my feelings in order to like survive. So when I was 22 and I went through this breakup, it was like a champagne cork popped and all of a sudden I felt everything. I was crying, I had pneumonia, I was having panic attacks, I was having crazy anxiety, I was overthinking and I was just feeling like not okay, so emotional. And I didn't know what to do with all of that because I was like, this is not how I usually operate. And that's why I went into therapy, because I didn't know anyone who did therapy and I didn't know anyone in the world that I now work in. That was like the last resort for me. It was so bad that I was like, I'm going to consider doing this because, I'm really at rock bottom right now and I'm not feeling good. And I don't even know if I really want to like be alive, to be honest. And so then I went to therapy and then things started making sense. And, I had to be really vulnerable for one of the first times in my life with my therapist and, get down to the root of what was really going on, which was so much deeper than just the breakup that I was going through.
Did you said that you were even considering like ending everything. Did you have like suicidal thoughts after the breakup and after everything blew out?
I wouldn't say I was suicidal, but I was having suicidal ideation. So, like, I was having thoughts of, like, maybe it would just be better, if I wasn't here, or, what's the point? Like, I was feeling very helpless. I was having those panic attacks. I was still navigating this betrayal that was going on. I was still going to work every day. And then, I sort of dropped the ball, I think, one day at work because I was clearly not mentally well. And I remember I got in trouble at work and, it wasn't an environment that was very, compassionate towards mental health. And yeah, then I was physically sick with pneumonia and feeling very lonely. And yeah, there was just a few moments, in the bathroom, looking in the mirror at myself crying, being like, okay, what are we going to do? But I really also had this little spark inside me around then where it was like, you can change. We can change this. We can heal. There's something better that's waiting for me. And it's kind of like a moment with God, I suppose. And so I just took that first step, get into therapy.
It is crazy for me what you're saying because I literally see myself in you. Because like I I don't think that our parents or our family or loved ones realize how much we've gone through and how much we had to heal on ourselves and heal things that were not even ours to heal in the first place. Like they might only realize about it when you're like an adult because like you tell them like, hey, like you don't even realize. Because in my case, like my parents up to me when I was 2, and obviously I was bullied at school. I was not learning the way I was supposed to learn. I was being told, I remember this day that one of my teachers goes to my mom at school, and my mom was going through the very bad divorce of my parents, and she got told like, you need to take your kid to the psychiatrist because we think that she's not well mentally, as in like she might be a little bit crazy, something like that. She might have some sort of this mental disorder, whatever that was. And obviously my mom was like, okay, I'm going through a divorce. We're broke. I'm really struggling to even feed my kid. And now you're telling me my kid is like, must have something in her head. And so I remember like my mom took me there and I was perfect. It's just the way I was learning was not the way, it was not the right way for me. But then I was also bullied because I was very skinny. Obviously, because of the adoption and everything that I've been through, my coping mechanism was to just like eat way less, right? And my mom didn't even know how to handle that. So I had a lot of issues with my body. And I remember even being kicked out of the house because I was not even finishing my food. And so the trauma of adoption and abandonment like kicked in a lot. And my dad wasn't there at the time. And so obviously I had a lot of anxiety. And I remember when my dad was back in town because he just left for a little bit. I remember I think I was 11 or between 11 and 13. And I said to mom, like, and my dad, like, I need to go to therapy because like I feel a bit like something's not good. I need to go. But obviously I was 13. I didn't even know what was going on, but I knew I needed help. And I think my mom took me there like once, but that was it. And I felt like they were not even listening to what was going on. And so now, later down the line, I put myself into therapy, I think 3 years ago. And it was because my grandpa, like, he died and I was in London and my family's from Spain. So I remember that I didn't make it back in time. And then that's when I realized, like, I've been numbing myself and now I need to fix my problems, but also fix problems that were not even mine to fix. And that's when I realized, like, okay, like, I don't think our families or my family in that case knew and knows that up until this point, like, everything that I had to work on. So how just you mentioned about finding God in that rock bottom moment. How has your life changed since that moment on? Because obviously now you're married, have been married for 6 years. You have a very thriving business. You are living your dream life. When was that tipping point that things start to look up and you start to be like, okay, there's something more, like, I know I can heal and get better?
Yeah. So I really feel like reinventing your life is a bit of this paradox, right? Like there are certain things that take time to heal, and it can also be said that we're always healing, right? Like there's no end point. But you can also instantly make decisions that you're going to change. Like you can decide, I'm going to choose differently and be a new person tomorrow. And I've had several of those moments, but I would say the biggest one is like right at that rock bottom when I'm deciding to go to therapy, probably like after the first session or 2 sessions, I just made this decision. Like I do not accept my continued role in my suffering. Like I do not accept these cards. I'm going to play a different set of cards. And I decided, like, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to go and create something better for myself. I'm going to go and be the person that I'm proud of. And I'm going to stop seeking those things in other people or seeking those feelings externally from sort of very quick hits of validation and destructive habits. And I'm going to go and like clarify what are the values that I want to live by. And I'm going to make sure that I'm living by them. And so I started doing that in small everyday ways. One of the questions that I was asking in the very, very early days of therapy and reinventing myself and my life was, what would I choose if I loved myself? And that was down to like what I'm eating for breakfast. What am I eating if I loved myself? When someone's inviting me to go drink alcohol and take drugs, am I going to say yes if I love myself? Probably not. Okay, not going to go to the gym. Going to go to my therapy room. And I started doing that in small ways based on that first decision. And I think it's important to hold both of these realities. Like, yes, healing takes time, and there are certain things that don't happen overnight. Change doesn't happen instantly right away. And also you can make these decisions that are overnight decisions of like, okay, we're drawing a line in the sand. From here on now, I have the power to change and I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, for me, it was just like that decision, it's time to go in a totally different direction, and remembering that I have God on my side. Because for me, I think one of the core things about my story and my trauma is that I've always felt like no one protected me, which is why I had to be perfect to protect myself, strong and disconnected from my emotions so that no one can hurt me because I'm my frontline defense. But I think I've learned over and over again, like, while it's amazing that I can fend for myself and I am a bad bitch who's very independent, I don't want to just be going to war with others and, always having to have my shield up. And so now it's like, I know that God protects me and redirects me. And even through those struggles, I was being redirected to something better. But knowing that I have that protection from God and then myself also allows me to then like open myself up to letting my husband like be my protector and letting him see me and letting him know me and other people as well.
How did you, obviously you mentioned you were very closed off and you had a very bad breakup. How was that transition? Because I feel like this is what a lot of women struggle with. Especially when we are hyper independent, like we just, it's like we need no man and I want to do everything by myself and all that kinds of stuff. Like, how do you go from that by a breakup to and being really closed off to starting opening yourself up and finding the love of your life and getting married? How do you let your now husband in? How was that journey?
Yeah, so there's a few things that come up when you ask me that. One of the things that I worked on in my therapy once I was coping was looking at my patterns with men and my daddy issues. And we started forecasting, what would I want in a dream partner going forward? And we were brainstorming about that and figuring out like some of the things that I thought I wanted were like coming from trauma. So we were crossing those off the list. So we made this list and took a photo of it. And my therapist was encouraging me to go and like be a match for someone who embodies those values. So like if I want someone who's trustworthy and able to have like deep intimacy, connection, good communication, like is passionate about their career and generous in their spirit, like am I being a match to all those things? Maybe I actually want to become some of these things too, right? Maybe that's why I desire it. So I started weaving that into my growth journey, and really consciously looking at like, how can I embody more of these things? How am I showing up in those ways too, so that that person can see me and find me and go, yeah, they're a match for me, right? So I was working on that for a couple of years. And then when I met my now husband, Tristan, I wasn't actually really looking for a boyfriend. I had just moved to England and I was kind of like, I'm an Aussie in London. Look at all these like hot guys with English accents. I love how they have such great manners, like holding the door for me. I'm going to go on some dates and have some fun and just like meet like-minded people and just kind of have a good time. And so I went on a date with him and I just was like, oh, like I feel, this man is really lovely. I'll definitely go out with him again. And then we kind of just hit it off. And he was just this very, just like safe man. Just never had to wonder, wasn't playing games. His actions matched his words. He was very forthcoming and forthright, honest, creating, time for a date, planning, like all the things that were just making me feel really valued and very cherished as a woman. And so I was like, oh, like I'm happy to date this man. And then about 6 months into being together was when I had my PTSD flashbacks of the sexual trauma. And so, I mean, kind of like for a part of me, my worst nightmare, because I'm like, am I going to scare this man off? I'm literally like in a ball crying on the floor. He has no idea of what this experience is like, because he's never dealt with PTSD or mental health problems, but just the way that he supported me through that and was very unconditionally loving, very safe, very understanding, so supportive. I think that just like changed my brain chemistry because I was like, wow, someone is like loving me and is there for me and protecting me in this like one of my worst moments.
Hot mess moments.
Literally like in my mess, and he's like, I see you, I've got you. That changed something for me in terms of vulnerability and recognizing like I can be vulnerable in love and let people support me and protect me and bring my walls down, and I'm not going to lose anything. I'm not going to lose you. I'm not going to scare you off. You're not going to think I'm a crazy bitch. And I think from that moment it was just like, oh, vulnerability is a good thing and I can let other people show up for me. And that kind of transpired and rippled into other relationships. And it gave me a lot of confidence with my business and sharing my story. And yeah, I'm like not afraid to be vulnerable so much anymore, because I've seen that it can actually create even deeper love and intimacy with people.
Do you think, I'm just going to ask you this because I also seen this with myself. Like, I've never seen a healthy man-women relationship because my parents were a bit of a mess. Bless them, but they were a mess.
Bless the mess.
Bless the mess. So the only, I would say, healthy relationship role models that I've had were my grandpa and my grandma. So would you say that when you found like a safe space in a man, which you never had before, do you think that in your mind, because it was not familiar with what you've experienced and what you had, you kind of self-sabotage, as in like, if he sees this part of me, he's gonna leave? Do you think like that's also what happened whenever you were going through all of that?
I feel like it's the first time that I didn't self-sabotage, right? Where
Interesting.
I let him show up for me. I let him see me in that mess, which was terrifying, because remember, my whole thing is like, keep it perfect to protect yourself. Never let them see you struggle. Never really like let people see you in that vulnerability or with things that are chaotic. I feel like that's why it was such a pivotal moment, because I let my guard down. And, I think one of the reasons that those memories emerged 6 months into dating him was because I finally had a safe, loving adult to process with. And like a lot of the members of my audience and community online, when they've heard me share that, have had similar experiences where suddenly flashbacks and PTSD come through really strongly when they're in a like loving relationship, because it's almost like your brain's like, oh wow, you've got a safe space now to process all that shit that wasn't safe to process before. Yeah. Here you go. But it can be really frightening, because we all want to be loved and no one wants to be abandoned. And so when you have such a deep and painful and also very taboo and stigmatized experience showing up for you, it can be really scary. But I also think if that person can support you through it, you just have such a strong love and such a deeper connection on the other side. And you also have like, I feel like so much power in your back pocket, because you're like, wow, I just navigated the worst moment of my life. My partner is still here. And like, what else can I do? I just did the hardest thing and I'm moving through it, and now I can do anything.
Yeah. I remember in my case also, because safety was never, or feeling safe was alien to me, and accepting that there are parts of me that are not as like bright and shine like other parts has really helped me like feeling safe, and also letting go of control and like letting go of like I'm not going to cling on to this because it's not good. And it has been way better. I think in your story you also mentioned like you just let go of controlling everything because God's got you, and obviously your husband not got you, but like how I see that you see it too, like a lot of women, whenever we have something really great going, whether it's business, relationships, whatever that is, we just want to control it and cling onto it because we don't want to lose it. How did you work through that? How did you work through letting go of control, put your best foot forward, and just let God take care of it?
Let God take the wheel. Yeah, so I've really had to embrace the aspect of, success that is mistakes and detours and like quote unquote failures, and really trusting in that. I'm really into human design, and I weave that into my work, and my profile numbers are 3-5. And so like the 3 being the experimenter, your success comes directly from your failures and your mistakes and your trials and tribulations. And that's how you kind of deliver wisdom to others that creates your success. So if you deny or you want to refuse or like run away from ever failing and doing everything perfect in this linear way all the time, you'll never actually reach your full potential. And so I want to reach like as high potential as I can. I want to milk the milk out of life and like experience like the fullness of everything. And so with that also there has to be an appreciation for the richness that comes from your failures. You probably hear it on like every podcast, like your success is built on like the steaming hot pile of your failures. And cliches are cliches for a reason. They're usually pretty good, pretty true. And so in those moments where maybe things don't go to plan, or I feel like I'm tightly gripping to something having to be a certain way and it's really just not going that way, I think that's where spirituality can be really this helpful ally, because like it's not all on me. It's a co-creative effort. And sure, it's not about being complacent and just laying back, staring at a vision board and being like, hope it works out. You play your part. But when you're playing your part and you're pushing and it's not working, I think dropping into surrender and being like, maybe I'm meant to actually go somewhere else or do this in a different way. How can I let God handle that? I think that's like going to allow you to drop into a bit more of a confident and assured place and let, the right course take course.
You help a lot of women reinvent themselves. Why do you think they struggle so much with reinventing themselves and being this version of them that they know they can be, but they just keep holding on to the old? What do you think it's holding them back from being the best version they can be?
Well, our subconscious brain, inclusive of our patterns, is very powerful. Subconscious brain wants things to stay the same, even if it's like really dysfunctional and probably not even that comfortable. It's familiar. Like a comfort zone can be very uncomfortable, but it's familiar. And your subconscious brain's job is to keep things familiar, because it's like that quote, better a familiar hell than an unfamiliar heaven, right? So consciously you might be like, oh, I really want to find my soulmate and I want him to be a man who really cherishes me and values women and, puts me first and lets me like drop into my soft femininity. But then you keep dating like dickheads who send you booty call tags and you're like, wait, why is this not happening, right?
You could pick in the bill.
Yeah, and it's also really easy in those moments to then blame yourself, like, why do I keep doing the thing that's the opposite of what I know I should be doing? So I think it's important to have compassion for yourself if you notice that you are stuck in a rut and you keep doing the same thing, whether it's that or procrastinating or like not making choices that are, you know, more symbolic of your higher self, let's say. So what I would say is that when there is that mismatch between what you consciously say you want and then what you're doing and what you're experiencing, that's where it's good to dive into like healing some of the subconscious roots so you can stop beating yourself up. So, you know, I think hypnotherapy is a great modality. I personally work a lot with rebirthing breathwork. I love that. And then even just, you know, working with someone who can help you, like get yourself in a new environment, work with a coach, get into a community of people who are choosing different patterns that are more similar to the patterns that you want to be living and breathing, and just giving yourself kindness along the way. But also the tough love to recognize like you're the one who's responsible for that change.
You just made me think about a quote that my therapist back then said to me, because this was late 2022. I started with my partner in 2023, but obviously I had a very massive heartbreak over this guy that he flew like all the way from the States to the UK, and I thought it was because of me, but it was because he wanted to see a new country. And I was like, okay. So obviously I left. When he left, like I was heartbroken. I was like, I remember sitting there for the first time in my therapy session. I was bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I'm so broken. I am really so broken, like honestly. And I was crying for an hour, like, bless my therapist back then, because, like, gosh, I was a mess. And I remember this quote that she said, and she's like, Jenny, you're not the child that's broken. You're the woman that amended. That was, like, a quote that she wrote, exactly those words. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Because, like, as a child, like, I feel like I was broken, but like obviously because I was able to reinvent myself, that made such a huge difference. But I will always, always, always think about that quote, about that phrase that she said to me. And I think that's when I started allowing myself to heal and to understand that it's okay if my heart is broken, and it's okay if a man wouldn't commit to me, because then it's just not my man anyway. I think that I want to conclude this episode by asking you, what would you say to 22-year-old you?
It's a tricky one because I feel like I don't have regrets. So the path, even though it was crazy, has led me to where I am today and who I am. And I'm so proud of myself. And I think I've literally created my dream life and continue to. But I think I would just whisper something in her ear, like to keep going and to keep facing that true north, and to remember that no matter what the past has been or where she's at, like she's capable of reinvention and change. And, you know, maybe like I do believe in like the quantum field and how you can talk to your future self. And I think your future self can talk back to you. Like imagine if me, the future self now, is that voice that was talking to me in the bathroom. Because there was a spark back then that told me to keep going, you know? So
You were destined to, like, you deep down, this is a tricky one, because like at that time, in that moment, you just don't feel worthy. But I think that somewhere in your subconscious mind, you knew that you actually deserve everything that you have now. Otherwise, you would not have it. There's always like, this is tricky because like at the moment you don't see it and you feel like not worth it, but like at the same time it's like, okay, why do you keep going then? Because you feel like you can have it. Otherwise we'd just stop right there and then.
Yeah. I feel like at the time my brain didn't think that I could change. I mean, at the time my brain was like, why am I even still going on, you know? I do feel like we have a voice of our soul, and it's illogical. Some people might call it intuition, but I really believe that we have this like divine intelligence in our soul. Like our soul knows why we came to earth. Why are we here? Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, what's our unique impact that we're coming here to make, you know? And so even though my mind at the time was like, don't want to keep going, like your life's a mess, you're at rock bottom, what's the point? Like, how did we get here? There was just like this, I describe it as a spark. I guess it was kind of like a voice somewhere from inside that was like, we can change this, like, let's go. And yeah, I don't know if that was
gives me
like
goosebumps. It's like, oh, you knew, you know?
yeah, and I had no evidence, you know. I had no, my life was a mess. My life was in shambles, and I wasn't feeling good. There was no evidence. It wasn't inspiring like it sounds like when you tell it in hindsight on a podcast, right? It sounds amazing when I look back in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that's a fucking amazing story that I've lived, like from zero to hero, a real heroine's journey, I think. But at the time, I didn't feel like that. And I think it's important to say that, because when people are in their own rock bottom or they're in their messy middle, they don't feel inspired by themselves. They feel like they are hotmess.com and like, how are they ever going to get out of this, you know? But I think if you get quiet and you sit with yourself, even in your like tears or your dark moments, and you feel your heart, you can ask God or you can ask your soul, like, tell me what to do. And I do feel like that voice will answer you in some way.
Yeah, I feel like deep down we always know what to do, but sometimes we are really, really scared of the end, like the response we might have or like the outcome, because sometimes it's just not the outcome that we would wish for. But again, you don't get all of the times what you want, you get what you need. So later on you can get what you want, but there's just no other way around it. And I think you're like a clear example of the easy way is the way out, but the only way through is actually to just go through it and feel it and go through the pain, so then you know actually what you're made of and what you want out of yourself and out of life. So I think that was really, really insightful. Thank you so much, Amy, for coming to the podcast. I really, really enjoyed your story. And this episode was also really special because, like, as I said, I see a lot of things in your story in myself as well. We're going to leave links to your socials because I feel like the work that you do is very, very special and it should be shared. Thank you so much. And your story is very, very, very inspiring. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks for sharing your story too, or parts of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi guys, it's your host here, Jenny Core. If you made it this far, I hope that this episode has helped you heal, grow, expand in some way. It would mean the world if you can subscribe, like, and comment, because it's gonna help the podcast grow massively. Your support means the world to me and to my team, and we're just gonna bring you better content, bigger guests. So please just support the podcast if you can, and if you think this is gonna help someone, please share it with them. I'll see you next Thursday.